Okay, in today's video, I'm going to talk about standards. Standards, those are the rules you make for yourself. The values, the principles, the behaviors, the beliefs that you want to live by. I bundle them all into the same word, standards. You can bundle them however you like, whatever gives you the greatest leverage over them. Now, why standards are so important? Well, there's probably two reasons. One is you can define them yourself. Standards don't need to be imposed on you. You can develop your own standards. And the second reason is they shape you to be the way that you want to be, as long as you adhere to your standards. So let me give you a couple of examples about some standards that I've developed and how they've shaped me. One of the standards that I have is turning up on time. I turn up for things on time because I used to turn up late all the time, and it used to drive me nuts. What a weird incongruence that is, right? So I'm turning up late for stuff, and I hate the fact that I turn up late, but I continue to do it. So I had to make it a standard that I turn up on time, and I'm seen to turn up on time. Because not only is it an internal standard, it's others I want. It's a standard I want to be seen by others. So I had to change a lot of behaviors to make sure I turned up on time. Instead of thinking, hey, that's a 20-minute car trip, I'm going to leave at 10:40 so I can be there at 11. I had to think differently. So it was more along the lines of, it's a 20-minute car trip, but only if the traffic's good. Likely, if I allocate half an hour to the car trip, there's a 95% chance that everything's going to go okay. So sure, there's the 5% chance it won't happen, but let's add another 5 minutes to it. So I'm going to leave not at 10:40, at 10:25. And then I'd end up leaving at about 10:27, but I was still up. 13 minutes into the car drive, I'd probably glance at the clock and go 10:40, this will be the time I'm usually leaving. And to help reinforce that standard, I'd ask myself, where I'm now 13 minutes into this trip, could I stomach the idea of leaving the house right now and being that far behind where I am? And the answer was no, that's insane, mate. And that would help reinforce that behavior. How I do one thing is how I do everything, is another standard I have. And that was starting to bring quality into everything I did, not taking shortcuts. Because when I start to take shortcuts, it affects my performance. One shortcut leads to another, leads to another. So a standard I applied was how I do one thing is how I do everything. How I clean the dishes mimics how well I train in my running. Do it now was another standard. I used to love putting things on lists. I still do. But I'd artificially manufacture big lists by leaving things. So the list would become big. So then I could conquer the whole list and feel great that I could get so many things done. Now here was the trick. I wasn't getting that list finished. In fact, if there were 10 things on the list, I'd be lucky if I got 3 done. The list wasn't so much a list, it was more a wish list of what I hoped to get done. And if I was honest with myself, I had no hope of getting it done. So instead of leaving things so I could build this big, beautiful list and get everything done, which was absolute bollocks, the standard I took up was do it now. So if I saw something, and especially if it only took less than 2 minutes to do. So say I had a load of washing in, I threw it on the couch, straight out of the dryer, just so it would air a bit. Why fold up warm clothes? I don't know why, but in my mind, I just let them cool down and then I fold them cold and put them away. So at that time, after the clothes had cooled down and I was going to shoot down to use the bathroom from upstairs or something like that, and I saw the clothes there and I could fold them up in 2 minutes, don't leave them till later, do it now. Make that part of what I was going to do. So I'm not just going to go and visit the bathroom, I'm going to fold the clothes, get them away, visit the bathroom, boom, another job done. So do it now was another standard. As I say, standards can be task-based, can be rule-based, can be behavioral-based. I want to share a little story with you, right? So I was flying back from Japan And I have trouble sleeping on planes. It's not a fear thing. It's just, I can't sleep just with the noise going on and sitting upright and just the combination of things, right? But I can doze. I get in that horrible little sort of doze where you're not quite awake and you're not quite asleep. Anyway, I was wearing my cap, one of my favorite caps, and it fell off. And I remember it being down by my feet. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll leave it there. I'll get it later. Because at that stage in the trip, I was too tired to even bend over and try and reach around down by my feet to get my cap. Anyway, what happened is I must have wiggled around over the subsequent hours, and I kicked the cap out in the middle of the aisle there. And someone found that cap. And their standard was, instead of finding the owner, they took it. Now, I know this sounds like a story where, I'm losing sleep over losing a cap. I'm not. I think it sucks, but I'm not losing sleep. But that person's standard, rather than finding the owner of the cap, was let's keep it. That's a rubbish standard. And that's why, they don't have a standard, potentially. And that's why standards are important. They shape our behavior. And I feel a bit sorry for them because they missed out on something. Because when you find an owner of something, there's that feel-good thing, that intrinsic thing that comes with it that makes us feel good. When we do something good for someone else, we feel it both ways. They feel it, we feel it. That's why standards are important. So, today's video, define your own standards. Now, a quick tip for you is this. Don't come up with too many standards at once. One of my very first standards was reduce my swearing. I'll tell you why. Just for me. Not advocating it for you, but just for me. What I found is I was using swear words to replace another word that would have enriched my vocabulary. If I used swear words more as a crutch, I knew my vocabulary would shrink. I'd get lazy in terms of the way I articulate things. So I try and refrain from swearing. I'm not going to say I don't swear, I do. I might get a fright, might bump my thumb with a nail, someone might do something crazy in traffic. Happens, right? But I wanted to reduce it. Now that's my standard. I'm not advocating that standard for you, but what I am advocating is that you develop your own standards. But going back to my tip, that was my first standard. And I sat with that standard for a week. And I checked in every day in my daily journal how I was going with that standard. And only when I got on top of that standard did I start to think about adopting another standard and then another. So don't come up with a list, I think, of 10 standards right off the bat. Just come up with one. One that will reshape your behavior as you want it to reshape it. That becomes your first standard. Then add another. Do one thing how you do another thing. Do one thing how you do, or you want to do all things. How you do one thing is how you do all things. Word it however you want. Then come up with another. Do it now principle. Then come up with another. Build your own set of standards. Don't need to share them with anyone else. You can self-monitor, you'll know how you go. But there is nothing, not nothing, there are very few things that I've found more impactful for my personal behavior change and my growth than defining my own standards. Because when you define your own standards, you're actually defining your own shape, who you are, as long as you adhere to those standards. So you do need to couple those two things together. What are your standards and how are you going to check in on how you're performing on those standards? That's it. That's it. Now, I don't need you to follow this advice. I need me to follow this advice. And only you know whether or not following this advice will help you. That's it. Let's roll. Catch you in the next one.